All right, I'm back with Manny, Morgan, and Robert, and I want to let you guys know off top, we invited the CTA to join us for this conversation, but they declined. So let's jump right in. It's fair to say the Chicago Transit Authority and its leadership are under a lot of scrutiny right now. Many people fed up and frustrated. So, Manny, how did we get here?
Yes, I mean, the issues involving the CTA have existed for a decade, at least when we talk about a funding perspective. But really, when the pandemic hit, it really exaggerated those fault lines within the system itself. But we saw the ridership sort of take a really large plummet, causing really harms to the amount of funding that they're able to receive from fare boxes. But also a worker shortage happened where workers ended up quitting or getting sick due to COVID. That really sort of exasperated how frequent these trains and bus sort of run through the system itself. And with that, continuing the worker shortage, we saw cleanliness take a dive, as well as just overall safety issues facing the system, to where we're at today, where it's somewhat improving, but it's still nowhere near where we were at before the pandemic.
And Robert, as an employee of the CTA, what's it like from your lens with the CTA?
It's hell,
That's frank, yeah.
From the discipline, from the management, all the way down to the low level, supervisors, managers. It's a lot. And we have a lot of issues with safety, and we have a lot of issues with doing the work of 2 to 3 people because that bus in front of you is not there. So you're doing the work of 2 buses, 3 buses. So you're running down the street, they got you running down the street, doing the work of 3 buses. Then you get to the end of the line, you're late. You got to decide if you're going to use the bathroom and leave late, or you're going to turn around and leave on time and hold it.
Yeah. I mean, it just leads to more burnout and frustration for y'all as well, and not good for morale. Morgan, you're with Commuters Take Action. What are you guys tracking when it comes to CTA right now?
Yeah, absolutely. We're tracking a lot of things. First and foremost, what percentage of trains and buses are actually running based on what's scheduled, as well as how much is running based on compared to pre-pandemic levels, which is a number the CTA themselves have not put out.
Yeah, and that's something we've run into as well. CTA not being very communicative. A lot of this is swirled around CTA leadership. Dorval Carter, lots of growing calls out there to remove him from leadership. So I had the chance to interview Mayor Brandon Johnson about how he feels about Dorval Carter. Take a listen.
What I look for in leadership is someone who is willing to be collaborative, someone who demonstrates compassion, and someone who just demonstrates competence. Now, look.
Does Dorval Carter meet those standards?
Well, here's what I can say. Is that ridership is up. That's important. The fact that we are hiring people, that's important.
But if I get a ghost bus, that doesn't really help me.
And look, this is not to say that these concerns and these challenges are not real. But what I am saying is that as much as people believe that one person can flip an entire system around overnight, particularly after coming off of just decades of disinvestment, let's just be very honest here, that the formula to fund CTA has always been underfunded. So is there more work to be done? Of course there is. Are we moving in a direction where we are hiring more people, where the ridership is up? Those numbers are clear.
All right, Morgan, what's your reaction to that?
Yeah, definitely one of frustration. I mean, is that clear? I don't think so. What's clear to me is the fact that workers and operators are upset, riders are upset, aldermen are upset, and yet there has been no accountability, there has been no change. Commuters Take Action started out as an organization wanting to uplift the concerns of the CTA, and at that time, naively, we thought maybe there was an awareness about it, but now everybody's aware and nothing's changed.
So Manny, we hear those frustrations. Why hasn't Brandon Johnson taken action? Is it because it's not as easy of a process to do so?
Well, quite frankly, Johnson right now seems to be on an island of himself with his support for Carter. We've had the governor come out and call for an evolution of leadership, as well as, as you mentioned, half of city council wants this person gone. Why he hasn't, I'm not sure. It seems like he trusts in him to deliver Primarily funding around the extension of the red line seems to be really a big issue here. But honestly, Johnson has the ability to unilaterally replace Carter if he wanted to. There is another option that is involved with the transit board that they can step in and do it. But those are really political appointments, mostly appointed by the mayor. So it's really up to him on whether or not what he wants to do with Carter.
Now, Robert, there's something I want you to weigh in on in particular. I talked to Alderman Daniel Laspada, who's been very passionate about public transportation and the issues around it. He believes a lot of the issues with CTA are a cultural problem. Take a listen to what he had to say.
For the CTA, it's not just the people running the buses or running our trains. There's a culture problem at the CTA. There's a direction problem at the CTA. And when you get to that level, and when you've been there for a while, that I think is when a change in leadership is necessary.
All right, Robert, culturally within CTA, do you agree?
Absolutely. CTA is a toxic workplace environment. It's been that way for a very long time. Multiple decades it's been toxic, and from the top down needs reform.
So what needs to happen? What reforms do you want to see?
New leadership.
It starts there, huh?
Starts from the top, Dorval Carter, then it's flunkies underneath him, CFO, all those $100,000 plus jobs need to go and be brought in with new people.
You being an employee, what does an ideal leader of the CTA need to have for you? What would be the best for that position?
Well, they need to have some type of transit experience. They need to have driven a bus or driven a train. Dorval Carter hasn't neither.
Yeah, and we've seen that issue raise up with some appointments as well that were made with, Reverend Iva Ackery, people who lack experience there. Morgan, you've worked with Alderman Daniel Laspada. What are your thoughts from what he said there?
Yeah, I think there's a frustration on part of Alderman Laspada, but all of the aldermen, that they don't have an ability to hold the CTA accountable, that they've been asking for these changes. There's been a few city council committee meetings that President Carter has showed up and not given any real answers on how things are going to be fixed or how things will change or why we're in the state that we're in now.
Yeah, and Manny, speaking of the cultural issue within CTA, you've done some really outstanding reporting on a tragic death that happened to a CTA bus driver. Can you fill us in on that, and are there any updates?
Yes, I mean, I speak with transit and bus operators all the time, on the record, off the record, that really have shared some insight to what it really is like to work for, the third largest system in the country. I wrote a story specifically on Miss Antia Lyons, who was a bus operator operating on the south side of Chicago when she suffered a cardiac emergency that ultimately resulted in her death. The biggest issue of the point is that she was in her bus unresponsive for nearly an hour before an EMT broke into the bus to try to save her life. And she sat there without any kind of check-ins from her supervisors or from the 24-hour control operating system there. There isn't really any update. The mayor, when the story first published, came out and said that there's an investigation underway. We followed up and tried to see what that investigation entailed. They forwarded us to CTA. CTA said, that they're looking into the matter, which raises some flags considering CTA previously told us that they stand by all of the actions that were taking place that day. So how could the agency police themselves if they already admitted to being on the side of how everything went down as it being okay?
Robert, hearing stories like that, especially as an employee of the CTA, what emotions come to mind?
Sadness, trouble, worry. Most of the time you're driving that bus, it's just you and the cameras. That's it. And this incident is personal to me because that operator worked out of my garage. She sat on that bus for nearly an hour before somebody came to her aid. And granted, the buses were scheduled at that time 30 minutes apart, but several buses came in that terminal and they didn't check on her. And it's like, where have we come to as a society where we don't check on our fellow coworkers? And control didn't do their job. That bus sat there. They know all the buses that's on the system. that bus is not moved within a certain time, they should have sent a text message saying, "Are you okay?" They didn't do that.
So what are you and your organization doing to make sure something like this doesn't happen? Is there anything you can do?
Well, it's little the workers can do besides check up on our coworkers more often.
Yeah.
It's mostly it falls on CTA and what they need to do and be more transparent and do their job.
Morgan, reform, lots of calls for it. What specific reforms would you like to see as a transit advocate?
Yeah, I think the new legislation introduced on the state level that combines all three transit agencies is a good start. As we've seen by the failings of other city agencies like CHA, trouble folks have had with the Park District, with CPS, it is very difficult for an agency that isn't directly under city control to be accountable to the city and to the people who live here. So I think that would be a good start, but also more transparency. Every time we've reached out to the CTA, they have their comms team reach out to us, which isn't community engagement. And when we ask technical questions, they don't have answers. And as I'm sure has been the experience of both of these folks, they are unwilling to have a direct conversation and are not looking to work with the citizens who live in Chicago to make things better and the workers who work at the CTA.
Manny, when you talk to riders out there and commuters, what do they want to see happen?
Frequency. They want to be able to rely on the bus or train services to get them to work, to doctor's appointments, to grocery stores, whatever the case may be. They don't want to be standing on platforms for 15, 20 minutes for a train to arrive. Cleanliness is another big issue, and safety. I think those are the three top priorities for riders. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's something that has been repeated over and over for the past 2-3 years now.
And Robert, we'll wrap it here, but give me a sense of why it's so important that Chicago has a reliable public transportation system and one where employees like yourself also feel safe too.
Well, Chicago is a world-class city. We should have a world-class transit system. But under Dorval Carter's leadership, everything's gone downhill. The workers' morale, the wages haven't kept up, the safety of the workers is, they hired 2 security companies. They spent $100 million on bringing in K9 security and unarmed security guards. That money just went down the drain because those unarmed security guards, they don't have a way to communicate with CTA. They don't even have a radio. They have no arresting authority. They have no radio. They have nothing. They're just there.
Yeah. We hear the pain, we hear the frustration, definitely some looking in the mirror needed from CTA for sure. Thank you, all three of you, for joining us for this conversation. Really appreciate your honesty, your frankness, and just being here.
Thanks for having
You're
me.
welcome.
Of course.
Thank you.